Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Before we get into this next chapter, we obviously got to answer the question from yesterday that was posed, which was, if you guys don't remember, who on our staff for the Akron football program has the highest bench total? The options were Coach Brian Cochran, Coach Tommy Zagorski, Coach Chris Cook, and Coach Anthony Ciccione. And to maybe your surprise, the correct answer was B, Coach Tommy Zagorski. At a whopping 565 pounds, bench pressed his senior year of high school. So give it up for Tommy Zagorski. I lied. I don't know if it was actually his senior year of high school. It could have been college. But that was the total number, and that was the winner of our trivia from yesterday. All right, now to jump into Chapter 10, which is called Finding the Opportunity. And so Chapter 10 begins off by talking about World War II and the Battle of Blitzkrieg over in Germany. And it starts by taking the approach that the Germans were taking at the time, because they wanted to flip their whole philosophy on how they wanted to attack the Americans at the time, the Allied forces. And what they wanted to do was to take a surprise approach. And they wanted to catch the Americans off guard and really make them flinch, because he knew if he could make them flinch that they would crumble and they would inevitably defeat them as a result. And so that's what their approach was, and they actually applied this approach the first time they attacked the Americans in that battle, and it worked. To our surprise, because the Americans were caught off guard, but it didn't end them. It took two very strong leaders that the Americans were fortunate enough to have, and that was President Dwight D. Eisenhower and then also General George Patton, two guys that stood up and said, we're not going to be fazed by this. We're not going to be abrupted from this approach, and instead we're going to find an opportunity to take advantage of them, because as they approach us, as they take this fast-paced approach to just full-on head of steam attack us and try to scare us, like they're becoming vulnerable in a few other ways, and they noticed that they were becoming vulnerable on the sides and also on the rear. So what they designed was a plan to encapsulate them. So as they would come head on, as long as they didn't completely break, so they took a bend don't break approach, as long as they could withstand that initial halt from the Germans, they knew they would be able to gather around the sides and then on the rear and outflank the Germans altogether. And that's exactly what they did, and that's how they were able to end up winning the Battle of Blitzkrieg overall. And so you can even kind of put that into a football analogy, because a lot of times there's these teams that have these high-tempo, air raid offenses, and that's what they want to do. They want to strike fast. They want to get on top early and then dictate the pace of the game. But if you can withstand that as a team, as a special teams, usually as a defense most importantly, if you can withstand that, now you can start to find opportunities in what they're doing and take advantage of them. Because a lot of times when if you take that approach, that up-tempo, fast pace, let's knock you in the mouth right away, you sometimes sacrifice time of possession. You sometimes sacrifice field position. And if you can withstand that and then take a lead on a team like that, then all of a sudden you put them into very predictable situations where now as a pass rusher, you can pin your ears back and go after the quarterback. And then also as a coordinator, you can design more drop 8 type defenses in order to really screw with them and put them at a disadvantage. So that's kind of taking it from a football perspective. Now back to what the book was getting to, and really the thing I took from this most was that a lot of times we put ourselves at a disadvantage when we make preconceptions. So preconceptions are the issue, and by that I mean sometimes we kind of plan out stuff probably too much, where we feel that every single thing has to go a certain way or else we're screwed, or all of a sudden we're at a disadvantage, when that's not always the case. Because just because something doesn't go exactly how we planned, or the way we envisioned it whenever we were originally putting together our plan, it doesn't mean we're screwed. It just means that we have to find another opportunity and take advantage of another way of this adverse moment. And that's really what it all comes down to. And then you could take all kinds of examples. Just say you have a professor in a class that is hard to work with. So instead of just wanting to bail and like retreat, as the Americans could have done whenever they were getting attacked by the Germans, instead of wanting to drop the class, maybe take that as a time to practice working on your patience, one of those core values, those key characteristics that we talked about in the introduction to this book. Or let's just say on the field, let's use that as an example, where all of a sudden you might not be starting during camp or week 1. So yeah, you could pack your bags up and you could take off, or you could take that as an opportunity to put in extra work, find something and bring something out of yourself that you might have not have known you were capable of doing. And then I love the term that they used at the end of this chapter, and that's how we'll end it. They used the term post-traumatic growth, which really just talking about going through some type of an event or some type of an experience that had an opportunity to beat you down or maybe could have crippled you or impaired you in any way, but you found growth in it. Post-traumatic growth. And you always heard the cliche saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that applies directly to that phrase. And then at any time you have an obstacle, you can use it as an advantage and taking it, deriving that obstacle, deriving that advantage from an adverse situation is something that comes up in the sport, in the game of football, probably more than any other sport. So being able to look at it that way and find an opportunity in every obstacle or every situation where adversity comes up, that's special, that's big. All right, guys, tune in tomorrow. We're about to wrap up part 1 and then move into action. And we'll have another trivia question for you tomorrow. All right, guys.